What's up, everybody? Welcome into a new edition of War Chant TV. I'm Aslan Hajavani, Director of Digital Media for WarChant.com. He is Irish O'Fell, Managing Editor of WarChant.com. Ira's over in Amelia Island, Florida for the ACC Spring Meetings. Tough assignment, boss. How are things over there?
We're doing okay. Now I am roughing it a little bit. I want you to know I can see the Atlantic Ocean from my hotel, which is, not bad. But I'm not at the Ritz-Carlton where all the ACC people are, like the athletic directors, football coaches, Willie Taggart, and all them. They're over at the Ritz-Carlton. I'm about a mile away, but it's still not bad. I can look out my window. I would turn my camera around for you, but I don't want to make anybody feel bad. So just take my word for it. I'm overlooking the ocean.
Right on. All right, man. So for the folks who don't know much about the ACC Spring Meetings, I mean, basically it's not that structured of a thing. It's kind of like the conference and all the important people and, from Greensboro and Charlotte and the coaches for the various sports kind of have a powwow every year in Amelia Island to talk about, matters of the conference, it seems like, right?
Yeah, this is very different from the ACC kickoff, which is the event most people know about when they talk about ACC meetings in August when we go up to North Carolina and they bring in all the coaches and players for football, and we have a big media event. It's kind of media days. They call it ACC kickoff in this conference. This is very different. This is a work conference. This is the athletic directors, football coaches, men's basketball coaches, women's basketball coaches, athletic directors, the senior women's administrators, and also the faculty reps all come to Amelia Island every spring, and they have about three days of meetings where they meet. It's kind of committee meetings. The football coaches will meet, men's basketball coaches will meet, so on. They all meet as groups, and they discuss whatever big issues are going on, anything from scheduling to changes in rules that are coming down the pike from the NCAA. A big topic this year is the transfer portal, the NCAA transfer portal, and now that that's been in place for a year, how it's worked and how it hasn't worked. They're talking about gambling regulations because gambling has been legalized in some states. So there's a lot of topics like that they discuss as a group, individual groups, and then they come together and decide whether or not the ACC as a whole wants to take a stance, either propose legislation or comment on legislation. And that all goes on over these 3 or 4 days. We come over and cover it as well because, it's an opportunity to come over and talk to the coaches and athletic directors and just kind of get updates on how things are going. But it's also, a time to report on some of those stories like the transfer portal and other topics that are important to
Look at that. Good segue. I appreciate that, boss. Way to set me up. Speaking of the transfer portal, it looks like Willie Taggart, one of his, one of the guys they're going to depend on the defensive line, Xavier Peters, apparently has entered his name in the portal, and it seems like this time around has every intention of following through and leaving Florida State. Not a question that you guys obviously wanted to force the issue on, but something that obviously he was asked about on Tuesday at Amelia Island, right?
Yeah, Willie did. He talked a lot about the transfer portal in general and his concerns with it. And then obviously the obvious follow-up question, which I presented to him was, Xavier Peters, it came out yesterday. He's decided to put his name in the transfer portal. He's looking to go closer to home. He's originally from Ohio and originally committed to Kentucky out of high school. And he wants to be closer to his home. I think he has a young child and he wants to get back that way. And so we talked to Willie about that for 2 reasons. Number one, how did that process work? Did Willie have a chance to talk to Xavier Peters? On that front, it doesn't sound like he really did. It kind of sounds like Peters had made up his mind. Now, again, it's kind of been a rocky, 8 or 9 months for Xavier Peters in Florida State. First, it didn't look like he was going to get in from an academic standpoint. He got in very narrowly for admittance in the fall. Then he was redshirted. Then in the spring, he was suspended from the team, didn't take part in the spring game, and as of the other day was still suspended from the team, from team activities. So it's been a little bit of a rocky road, but he decided to transfer home. It sounds like Willie Taggart would have liked to have kept him, but it didn't really get much of a chance to talk to him. And that was one of the things that Willie lamented about the transfer portal, which we're writing about. You can read more about it on warchant.com, but it really has taken the communication part out of the process. In years past, if a young man or a young woman wanted to transfer, they would talk to their coach. They would have to get approval to even be contacted by other schools. Now, the student athletes can just go in, sign some paper, say I want to be in the transfer portal, and they're in. And basically, that's it. And Willie, sometimes coaches can get the young men to reconsider. But in this case, it sounds like Xavier Peters has already made up his mind. So it's a big loss. I mean, he's only played in a couple games last year. He ended up getting redshirted, but he was a really talented young defensive end. You combine that with losing Brian Burns to the draft, that position's taken some hits, and it wasn't necessarily loaded in the first place. So that was one other thing that we talked to Coach Taggart about, is the defensive end position and kind of how they're going to bounce back from another important loss.
Well, that's why they're going to go to the 3-4, Ira. It's going to be all right, man. They're just going to throw those linebackers out there on the edge, and all will be well, I bet. So we'll see how that works out. Also, from the Florida State side of things, David Coburn, who is now the athletics director, no longer has that interim tag at the beginning of his title, was also out there in Amelia Island. You had an opportunity to sit down with him and talk about several topics. I guess one of the ones that really seems to be quite interesting that you'll be writing about more on warchant.com, and if you're not a member, use the promo code WARCHANT30 for a free 30-day trial, is the current arrangement that Florida State University has between the athletics department and the booster organization, Seminole Boosters. You know, there's so many misconceptions about the way things are set up. I mean, could you maybe set the table with how things are currently now and the fact that what this means that they're thinking about maybe changing it and altering it? It seems like a pretty big move.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, you called it the current arrangement. It is current, but it's also a long-time arrangement. I mean, you know, Seminole Boosters, under the direction of Andy Miller, who's the CEO and president of it, has been, you know, a huge part of Florida State's athletics growth. I mean, basically, Andy Miller and the Boosters grew along with Coach Bowden in the dynasty years, and really, you know, they're the fundraising arm for the department. Where it's really it's always kind of been simmering in the background, the structure, because it's not a typical structure. And in most schools, the booster department reports to the athletic director. And so if the athletic director wants them to pursue a certain goal, or he sets a vision, they basically get their marching orders and go do it. But Florida State's a little bit different. Andy Miller and the boosters, they can't go out and make decisions. They don't decide what sports get funded. They don't decide what equipment is bought or what facilities are built. They don't make decisions, but they don't report directly to the athletic director. They report to Westcott, the university. And basically their job is to meet the demands of the athletic department. So if the athletic director says, hey, we want to build, for example, the football facility, which they're building, the new, it's a part of a $100 million capital campaign, they have to work together with the athletics department and the football coaching staff. That's where kind of things were breaking down with Jimbo Fisher at the end of his tenure. That's where all of this kind of bubbled up. And look, a big part of the reason that David Coburn was selected as the interim athletic director is because he has a long relationship with Andy Miller. And part of his kind of marching orders when he took over as interim AD was to help fix that solution. Here we are now, about 8 months later, and what they're doing is they're looking at restructuring that arrangement. And you know, David Coburn did not say we're going to change it completely to where the boosters do report to the athletic director and the athletic director has a little bit more autonomy. But he did say it looks like they're going down the road of restructuring. He said the President Thrasher wants it. The Board of Trustees chair, Ed Burr, is in favor of it. And even the boosters. During these conversations, one thing that David Coburn said to me was, now that they've had these conversations, both sides have really seen that they want the same things. It's not as drastic a change as it might look on the surface. For years and years and years, it seemed to work pretty well for Florida State. I mean, you had Andy Miller, who's been in that role for 30-plus years. When Dave Hart was the athletic director, it seemed to work fine. When previous athletic directors were there, it seemed to work okay. Over the last, you've had some turnover in that position the last several years. I think Stan Wilcox, who recently left as the athletic director, that relationship didn't work as well. Stan Wilcox was very much focused on the athletics department, didn't have a great relationship with the boosters. The boosters didn't have a great relationship with the athletics department. So David Coburn didn't say exactly what they're going to do differently, but he did say that they are looking at restructuring. From a day-to-day standpoint, I don't know that it's a huge change, but I think from a perception standpoint, and also, again, when you talk about football coaches and you're trying to hire people, they want to know, is the athletic director does he have the final say or not? And this will, I think, if they change the structure and have a more clear-cut role for the athletic director and the boosters, that they may alleviate some of those concerns.
In speaking to him now with that interim tag removed, does anything change for him? I guess, what were his thoughts? I mean, I'm sure he kind of expected it to happen. It seems like, if you read the tea leaves and kind of put two and two together that John Thrasher was going to end his tenure at Florida State as president with David Coburn working in that AD role. I mean, does anything change now for David Coburn, or does this just give him more, autonomy or maybe more security in terms of the way he's going to be able to attack some of the problems that are going on in the athletics program right now?
I'll probably be writing a little bit more about that in the coming days, because I think I'm going to do something a little bit more in depth on that. But yeah, it does change some things. The biggest thing immediately it does is it kind of calms any anxiety that was in the athletics department. And David Coburn admitted that a lot of the coaches were kind of uneasy about it. They didn't like the fact that they had an interim athletic director. And when you look at FSU President John Thrasher, he's under contract through November 2020. That's about a year and a half away. He's not expected to re-up for another year. It doesn't sound like. So, you've got a president who's only got about a year and a half left in his term. And there's a good chance he's going to want the new president might bring in a new athletic director. So I think there's a feeling in the athletics department among a lot of the coaches and the staff was that the athletics department was going to be kind of treading water for the next year and a half. And they wanted to know there's some stability. They wanted to know that David Coburn had the authority to run the department how he sees fit. And so basically it sounds like I think David Coburn was okay with the interim title, and I think John Thrasher might have been okay with the interim title, but to kind of give some reassurance to the coaches, to make the staff feel better that there's a consistent force running the department. This isn't a substitute teacher. This is the guy who's going to be running it for the next year and a half at least. I think it's something that's for them. And I think from that regard, it could help the athletic department, just the day-to-day kind of comfort level. The other thing, I think when you talk about what it does, I don't know that he's going to have. It's not like he's going to start making wholesale changes. I mean, his priorities are pretty much what they were. The big one being, again, trying to get Florida State on better financial footing than they were when he took over that position. So again, I think it's not. I don't want to say it's just a name, because it's not just a name. But that's the biggest thing, is I think it's just kind of will alleviate any concerns. The other thing I did ask David Coburn, like how long he plans to be in that position. Does he definitely necessarily plan to step down as soon as John Thrasher steps down, or what the plan is? And he said that's open-ended. He said, President Thrasher told him, I want to take off the interim title. I want you to be the guy. And however long you want to be in that role, you can stay in that role, and then you'll see what happens with the new president. And David Coburn said he likes it. He's enjoyed that. He's enjoyed this position more than he probably expected to. So it's not out of the question that he might even stay on past John Thrasher's time. I wouldn't suspect he is very long, maybe a transition period. But, I think he's enjoying the role a little bit more than he expected.
Right on. All right, plenty going on over at Amelia Island for the ACC Spring Meetings. What's going to be on the agenda tomorrow, do you think, Ira?
The football, basically each coaching group, the committees, the football coaches committee, the basketball coaches committee, the men's and women's, and then the athletic directors, they'll have their individual meetings and they'll make recommendations on different topics. So if, for example, like men's basketball is going to a 20-game schedule now for the ACC, if for some reason there was some issue with that, they would discuss it. The ESPN, the television partners for the ACC network, are going to be coming back in tomorrow to talk to the athletic directors and make their presentation, kind of explain where they're at with the rollout of how they're doing with the cable partners and getting those deals secured, because the network's supposed to launch in just a few months, and not all the cable networks are on board, so they have to get that update. And then any decisions they're going to make, the committees will basically the coaches will take little straw votes and decide, okay, where do we stand on these topics? And, for example, if the transfer portal or any other rules changes, and then they'll make their recommendations at the end of tomorrow. Then on Thursday, we'll have a sit down with Commissioner John Thrasher, Commissioner John Swafford, to talk about what those recommendations are, any formal stances the conference is taking. And then he's obviously going to give us a pretty extensive update we expect on the ACC network. I don't know if he'll get into what kind of revenue it's going to generate for all the schools, but they should have more information about how the network's coming along in terms of those cable carriers.
All right. Awesome, man. Check out warchant.com. Stories from Ira up there live now on the website include Willie Taggart's thoughts on the transfer portal and the sort of blowback and the unintended consequences of it thus far that the coaches in the conference seem to have picked up on. That's, again, over on warchant.com. If you're not a member, use the promo code WARCHANT30 for a free 30-day trial. Ira and I will be back tomorrow. Ira, use SPF 35. Looks like you're getting a little bit of a glow on you. We don't want to get you burnt, man. Have fun out there.
I appreciate it, buddy. Take care.